Remember the first time you saw something that would impact your life and you instantly fell in love with it? How you thought it was the greatest thing ever and you desired more of it, and every second you spent with it just made your life that much better? Then you see that somebody made something that involved the thing that you loved, but when you got that new thing, it captured none of what made the thing that you loved special. Welcome to Mad Musings, where you get to hear me ramble for the next several minutes about the Red Dwarf RPG and all the missed opportunities. I'm Mr. Welch, and if you're William J. Murderface, get ready for your favorite thing: disappointment. I've said this countless times. Licensed games are usually lacking in multiple departments because the company either can't branch out legally and fill in the gaps in plot or setting, or they get cut woefully short and everything they wanted to talk about is left out of the game because it was never put into the core book and the additional source books never get to materialize. For Deep 7 Press, the problem is the former. Red Dwarf came out in 2002 and had one more source book that covered the entirety of the 7 seasons of the show, with most of the internal imagery consisting of production stills, and then the game ended. The first thing you're going to notice about the game is how simplistic the mechanics are. It's a stat plus skill system that's inverted, where you want to roll equal or under the target number on 2d6. That's not a lot of range for a mechanical system, where the average roll, of course, being 7, that's still only a range of 11 numbers. Snake eyes are a critical success, and boxcars are a critical failure. There's a variety of races that have limits on their stats, including holograms, robots, and a variety of genetically engineered life forms. The book does branch out from the evolved animals in the show by adding the rabbit, mouse, rat, and iguana to the dog and cat races that were already canon. The game is set on the titular spaceship, where you are the surviving crew left alone in a galaxy where everything is slightly askew. Granted, you can change this up as you want, but the impression given is that the players are looking to recreate the funnier moments of the show in this game. And granted, there are a ton of funny moments to recreate. The game gives you a lot of characters, locations, and villains from the show as can be expected, and there is some advice to adding comedy to the game. That last part is important because, well, it's a comedy RPG. Red Dwarf's humor isn't easy to copy. Madcap humor, if done poorly, becomes too busy to process correctly. For humor of this sort, typically you need a straight man to mediate the comedy, and nobody in most comedy RPGs wants to play the straight man. For this reason, you don't find many comedy RPGs that go straight madcap. There's a reason why the Marx Brothers had Margaret Dumont in 7 of their movies. A huge portion of Monty Python's success was that any of them could play the straight man in any given sketch. The role of the straight man is largely going to be played by the Game Master, who's called the AI in Red Dwarf. Just remember, there's a reason why the straight man got paid twice what the clown made in vaudeville. Dying's easy. Comedy's hard. For combat, Red Dwarf goes with characters being nearly indestructible. They can be injured plenty enough, then injuries can be quite amusing, but death is actually quite difficult. That's a good line to straddle in comedy games. Players don't want to worry about hit points when they're trying to get a good laugh. Surprisingly enough, dealing with lethality in comedy RPGs is a major sticking point. You can always turn the characters into human punching bags like Toon or Teenagers from Outer Space, or you can go in the opposite direction and make death grotesquely unfair and hilariously easy like Paranoia does. But for a game where the hologram characters start off dead, you have to find a balance. There is still danger for the players, but it's more of the you get knocked out of this scene rather than it's time to roll up a new character. One aspect you will need to remember if you play a game like Red Dwarf is to keep the comedy fresh. The show rarely recycled characters, even well-remembered bad guys only appeared once on average. It kept the jokes coming at a non-stop rate, so if one episode fell a little flat, the next one tried something entirely different. Having an overarching villain is always an option, but the game provides you with 10 pages of various backgrounds and threats from the show, so use as many as you can when possible. Don't flood an adventure with too many different threats unless you're doing a gang-up episode for a change, though. The game does have a surprisingly comprehensive starship combat system, which is admittedly a little out of place in a game where an unarmed mining ship was the main setting for most of the show. There's a variety of different ships presented, all of them of course from the show, with one exception. But despite the rules for ship combat, only a few of them actually have weapons, and only one of them could even be considered anything close to a warship. You can use ship-to-ship combat to break up some tedium, or to kickstart an adventure that requires pirates or similar villains. There's a lot of secondary characters from the show in the main book, though most of them appear in the supplemental season guide that covers the seasons 1 through 7. Ace Rimmer, Alpha, and Captain Hollister get about a page each, along with some crew members from Season 7. For bad guys, you get a page each on the Inquisitor, Legion, Mr. Fibble, and the Emo Hawk. Of course, it wouldn't be complete without full stats on Lister, Rimmer, Cat, and Crichton, with Kachansky getting equal treatment, even though she only appeared in the 7th season as a primary cast member. If somebody isn't familiar with the show, then these names mean nothing to you, so it's your civic duty as a geek to force them to binge the entire show over the next 50 hours. They will thank you later, after they get some sleep. One thing that is glaring reading over the book is the amount of jokes they tried to cram into it as asides when describing the rules. I lost track of how many shots the writers took at Captain Hollister's weight. I get that that was a running joke on the show, but after a while you're just beating a dead horse with the same joke. The asides quickly become unfunny, as it feels the writers were just trying too hard. Granted, I will give them that the joke about Rick Mayall ascending to a higher plane of existence did age well due to his tragic and sudden passing, but the joke about Welsh miners rioting is going to fall flat since most people can't pick Wales out on a map. For most people, it's the Canada of England. Without a reference, the joke goes right over their head. There's 3 books that were released for Red Dwarf: the core rulebook, the Game Master Screen, and the series source book. The core rulebook goes for over $100 on secondhand markets today. The source book is so rare I couldn't find a copy for sale, but people did want $100 from the previous sales that I could find. You might get lucky at a used bookstore, but if your used bookstores are anything like my used bookstores, don't hold your breath. It's almost 2 decades old. It's considered a collectible and is more likely going to be read than played, but such is the fate of so many licensed games. That's the Red Dwarf role-playing game. The mechanics are simplistic, character generation is largely limited, and there's not a lot of guidelines to creating new adventures rather than just living out the same previous episodes of the show. This is not a game you're going to make a campaign out of. If you want to do some one-shots for your friends, it's adequate for that. Comedy RPGs are hard. This one is competent enough, but fails to capture the madcap antics that made the show a classic. Players all want to be the funny one, but somebody's going to have to at least try and be serious long enough for the jokes to land. That's not an easy thing to do. This marks the 49th Mad Musings since I started this channel. I reviewed games from dozens of publishers of varying quality and fun. You guys really like this review. They are by far some of the most popular videos I make, which explains why I hit 4,000 subscribers today after I started making these with more regularity. Special thanks to Jeffrey Pearson for donating to the Get Newer Books for Review Fund so I can look for newer books. If you like these channels, please like and subscribe. If you want to help defray the cost of getting new books, my PayPal is in the description. Thanks everybody for watching, though. Because of you, I'm going to do something special for the next video. RPGs aren't easy to get right. You need to keep expanding the line to keep the game interesting, but without flooding the market. For the 50th episode, I am covering one of the most influential RPGs of all time. The one that gave us the grimdark darkness of the grimdark 90s, Vampire the Masquerade. It propelled RPGs into adult subject matter. It captured a market that many didn't even know existed, and gave us a lot of people who pretended to like the movie Job Interview with a Vampire. It was groundbreaking for its time, even though it led to some of its players becoming insufferable. Still, despite the antics of some of its enthusiasts, it did get me laid. So, there's that.